Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This story was created in the relationship advice subreddit by user letok7529. The post is titled, "My fiance's grandma, 75F, made a wild accusation against me, 27M, considering removing her from our wedding guest list." This past weekend, we had my fiance's family visit and it was an overall disaster. I have known her family since 2015. We recently bought a house and had an old college roommate move in to help out since we have spare bedrooms. My fiance and her sister had a small argument over her sister's behavior. They made up and I assumed everything was fine. I was in the bathroom during the argument. With everything settled, we planned to go to dinner. My roommate and I drove her grandparents while my fiancé drove with the rest of the family. We split up like this because we are the only two who know the parking lot, my fiancé and I. Her grandma was silent the entire drive. When we arrived at the restaurant, her grandma started glaring at all of us. She eventually refused to order and went to sit outside. We assumed she wasn't feeling well, had returned to the hotel, or was still upset about the argument. The following day, she refused to come to a family dinner I had been preparing all week. We figured she was still upset. We were annoyed by the rudeness and blatant disregard for all the work we put in, but we still had fun. She ended up staying at the hotel for the remainder of the trip. The rest of her family continued to visit with us and the trip ended on a happy note. The next day, I noticed that her grandma had blocked my entire family on Facebook. We spoke to my future mother-in-law and got the real story. Apparently, on the way to dinner, her grandma thought that our roommate and I were getting too friendly. She is somehow convinced that I'm going to leave my fiancé for our roommate, steal our house, and have my family help. My fiancé was shocked to the point of being speechless. When she was sitting outside the restaurant, she was nearly storming back in and accusing us in front of the entire restaurant. She has not spoken to us since and is apparently acting like everything is normal now that she's home. My fiance's family has all been apologizing and assuring us that none of them believes that is what's happening. I guess what really upsets me is the lack of care for the planning I put into the dinner and that she thinks so lowly of me. I've never done anything to suggest that those are my intentions and have been nothing but excellent to her granddaughter. What also upsets me is that my grandma was so excited to see her grandma. My grandma is not doing well health-wise and we don't know how much longer she'll be around. The disappointment on my grandma's face hurt me, knowing she wouldn't be able to visit with someone she hadn't seen in years. My fiancé and I have talked and do not believe we've done anything wrong. We're currently holding her wedding invitation. I still really care for her other family members until we get some kind of apology. If it were up to me, I'd cut all ties, but I am willing to get over that for a day if my fiancé really wants her grandmother there. She's never been anything but kind to me, so this sudden shift is shocking. TLDR, my fiance's grandma said I'm cheating on their granddaughter with no evidence. User Jamie Cam said maybe she is beginning to suffer some cognitive issues. If she hasn't behaved like this in the past, then don't cut her off just because of one incident. Your fiance should speak to her parents about any concerns and figure out together what needs to be done, if anything. Do not push her to cut ties with the grandmother. Under this comment, a user named SmoothAD4859 said, "My mother's aunt accused me of stealing her jewelry while staying in her house during college. We understood something was wrong and she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I was living in a dormitory and hadn't seen her since high school." Under that same comment, OP said, "Possible. She's getting checked for it next month." Ultimately, it's more her say than mine as to our next move. User ManBearBoar said, "OP, I know you've said your Emma Mill is having her screened at her next follow-up. She needs a psychiatrist or a neurologist or both. A dramatic shift in behavior coupled with the fear and anger you're describing here is a classic and common sign of Alzheimer's that fits with her age range. I am so sorry you're going through this and I know it's incredibly hurtful. I know it's difficult, but I would suggest dropping it aside from advocating for her medical care. The real and devastating effects of Alzheimer's on the brain essentially mean she is no longer herself in those moments. It is not the person you know doing those things. Have someone assigned as a grandma minder at the wedding to keep her behavior in check and remove her if she is beginning to have an outburst. Best of luck." User Reverend Vader said, "Someone of this age losing the plot is not uncommon. You just have to work as a team and let it slide, I'm afraid. It's like getting angry over what a toddler says and does, and some elderly adults revert to that level of maturity and behavior. I never had it in my family, but my ex-wife had a few over 70 that just lost their grip on reality. The key is to not take anything seriously. When you get married, you need to have a clear plan and person to run point and prevent them for playing up at the ceremony, as it's just part of older family members losing their faculties. My ex-wife's grandma got dementia at 65 and lived another 30 years. Family gatherings were interesting to say the least, but it was waved off like you would with a young child who knew no better. Forget the apology. In her reality, it will all be true. You just need to make sure she has a handler for the actual wedding unless the family decides to leave her home. User GlassHedgehog3940 said, "Is it possible that grandma is slipping into dementia? If her behavior is out of the ordinary, I would be concerned about her mental state. My dad had Alzheimer's that started slowly with stuff like this. He would confront me about things that never happened. He also had to start calling his co-workers to ask for directions to get back to his shop, on the same grounds as the company. Maybe hold off on your anger because her mind could be slipping. Sorry, you're having grandma issues. It's difficult and it sucks. Best of luck with your wedding. Grandma will probably need a babysitter to keep an eye on her. I hope you don't exclude her." User EatonRD said, "I understand this is upsetting, but I don't think you're being rational about this. She's an elderly woman and this indicates there's some type of cognition problem. It shouldn't upset you what she thinks about you because she's not thinking logically. It can be upsetting to have family members who have these types of issues, but a lot of people deal with it as relative age. You need to be the bigger person here and the kinder person and have some compassion." I pretty much agree with all of the comments I just went over. Being 75, it's very likely that the grandmother is having issues with her health. This becomes even more likely since OP mentioned that she has never really lashed out like this in the past. While this sort of thing can be infuriating, getting overly angry will just drain you. It's best to wait for the checkups on the grandmother before making any rash decisions. If it turns out that she is totally sane, then you can make more serious decisions. The last thing you want to do is freak out on someone with dementia or Alzheimer's. Then you'll be looked at as the one with issues. Just under 2 weeks later, OP gave us an update. "Hey all, so I made this post 2 weeks ago about my fiance's grandma accusing me of wanting to cheat on my future wife with our roommate. Since then, things have developed quite rapidly. She finally called my fiancé last night. The call lasted all of 3 minutes and was lots of awkward silence and 'this wasn't meant to hurt you, my fiancé not me, and I'm still afraid for you.' The call ended and my fiancé didn't change her feelings about this situation. Not being satisfied, my fiancé called her back the following morning and explained she didn't like how the call went. Her grandma burst into a fit and called our roommate a dog that needs to move out. My fiancé was also told to protect your home and evict her. I was offended by 'you are expecting too much of him.' Me. You work nights and leave those two home alone. He is no saint." She cited a previous relationship between my fiancé's aunt and a man. They were engaged and he cheated on her. This aunt has said several times that this situation is nowhere near alike and that I am not like that man. Her grandma has doubled down on her theories and has not apologized. She is also convinced I'm the one who removed her from the guest list. I have voiced my opinion but have left the ultimate final choice up to my fiancé, who seems pretty set on her not being invited. I know a lot of replies mention dementia, but based on what my future mill has said, this has happened before. I'm wondering if she's just expecting to get away with it because she always has. With all of these recent developments, would it be bad to leave her off the guest list? I'm worried it will cause a fight or she will say something and ruin our big day. TLDR, fiancé's grandma has doubled down on her insane theories, and we think not inviting her to our wedding may be best. User GoldenDragon001 said, "Since you are the innocent party here where your in-laws and your fiancé believed in you, you should leave the decision to your fiancé to invite her grandma or not. Because of your post, it seems that her grandma's accusation has no ground, and she's stating nonsense due to seeing her own daughter's betrayal. Her family knows their grandma best and they can make the decision regarding her, because it will be a heavier burden for them later on whether they will regret or rejoice in having her presence. And if they want their grandma present while you don't, you may cause tension as well. You can avoid the confusion, hurt, and mistake by allowing your fiancé to make this decision and just abiding and following through with her." User DV Moonbeam said, "Frankly, I'd be afraid of her making a scene at the wedding, like standing up and screaming objections in the middle of the ceremony." User Cthulhu Almighty said, "This is the way a lot of older, especially religious people are. I have 2 female cousins that are like sisters to me and they can consider me their little brother. About 20 years ago, they were living together in a house in a major college town in the South. The older one got married and moved with her husband across the country. I was living about 1,000 miles away at the time going to college, but my roommate was moving out and I was looking for something new. My cousin and I started talking about me moving down and transferring schools. Her parents got wind of it and cried out, "What would people think?" We were both puzzled as we had no idea what they were talking about. Turns out, they thought people would think that since we are a man and a woman living together, even in separate rooms, that people would get the wrong idea. We just laughed and said, "This isn't Alabama or West Virginia." User JessMiles89 said, "I feel like older generations/grandparents hold grudges for a long time. My grandma was extremely wary of my husband for a while. He is Chinese and I am white. It comes from my aunt being engaged at one point to a Vietnamese guy whose family forced him to break up with her. She thought my husband's family would do the same, but she learned how much they love me." The problem with the fiance's grandma is clearly she will not let it go even if the case is clearly different. The fact that she is still pressing it, despite what your fiance and her aunt have said, means that it will not end anytime soon. I would have a long talk with your fiance because my biggest concern is how she will act on the actual wedding day. That was the final update we got from OP regarding this situation. He did make a post talking about his fiance's wedding dress, but nothing specifically about this situation. It also seems that the grandmother hasn't seen any doctors yet. If she is still adamant about the accusation, then I agree it's probably best to not invite her, just on the off chance that she creates a scene at the actual event. If she were to yell out that OP is cheating on his fiance, it would just create unnecessary drama and spread toxic rumors amongst the other guests. It just sounds like a headache that can and should be avoided entirely. This next post was made in the True Off My Chest subreddit by user OKPin1617. The post was made just over a week ago and is titled, "I slept with my sister's husband after she passed away. My older sister passed away 7 months ago. It was an accident, so it was totally unexpected, and I still don't believe she's actually gone most of the time. It feels unreal. Our family still hasn't recovered, and I don't know when or if we ever will. My sister was 10 years older than me. I'm 22 and she would be 32 now. She and her husband have 2 kids, both under 5 years old. My family has been helping him with the kids. He's a good dad, but understandably, to suddenly become a single parent to 2 very young kids while needing to maintain his job and deal with the grief of losing his wife, he needs help. He moved here because my sister wanted to be near us, her family. She wanted to raise her kids where we're from, where she grew up. He's originally from another state, but he agreed to settle down here when they got married because it was so important to my sister. I think we're all nervous he'll move away now that he has no reason to stay, and we won't get to see the kids often. I just graduated college in the spring. This past year, I was helping out with my niece and nephew a lot. I often picked them up from daycare and did things like that because I have a flexible schedule compared to everyone else. I've always gotten along with my brother-in-law really well. He's always been nice to me and treated me like a little sister. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to him for advice, especially regarding guys and things like that. It's easier to talk to him about certain things because he gives me more honest, unbiased advice than my parents or sister. I really thought my sister was so lucky, and he was the type of guy everyone wants to marry. Good looking, has a good job, a great dad, really personable, responsible. Just the definition of the complete package. My sister had been with him since they were both freshmen in college, and we all knew she was going to marry him the first time we met him. Even I, as a little kid, knew he was the one. I slept with my brother-in-law this weekend. I was over there on Friday. I picked the kids up from daycare, which I do every Friday since I only work a half day. I made dinner over there. I had no intention of having sex with him or trying to have sex with him. I hadn't been aiming for this to happen. He initiated it. I didn't say no. It started with kissing, then he started taking my top off and I let him do it. To be very clear, he didn't force me. He's never done anything that I'd consider inappropriate with me or toward me. At the time, I enjoyed it. It made me feel good that he wanted me, but at the same time, I kept thinking, this is wrong, this is wrong. I sort of just laid there. It was very much about him getting off. I think he just needed it to feel comforted or something. Afterward, we got dressed and didn't say anything. Then he said he was really sorry and that we shouldn't have done it. I told him it was okay. He said he'd prefer if we didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't plan to. I feel so dirty about it. It was so wrong. I feel like a little kid who has done something that they're going to get punished for, and I'm convinced somebody is going to find out. Other than in terms of morality, there isn't anything wrong with this. But again, that's only when morals are thrown out. I think OP and her brother-in-law both understand deep down that this was quote-unquote wrong. That's evident in the fact that they both said nothing to each other afterward, other than that this should stay between the two of them. I don't necessarily think it's fair to shove blame on anyone in particular here. I understand that the guy is under immense stress, but to make advances on his deceased wife's sister is definitely very weird, and it's equally as uncomfortable for OP to reciprocate those feelings. And looking back at my opening statement where I said this is only wrong in terms of morals, I'm now starting to backtrack on that a little bit. I think an argument can be made that this is wrong in every facet of the word, but it just feels so dirty, just as OP said. User Valde Reads said, bet that post-nut clarity hit like an atom bomb. Under this comment, another user said, yeah, he's definitely moving out of state now. User Happy for You 1998 said, do you look like your sister? As a sister myself, I understand why you feel guilty. It was wrong in my opinion, but you are both grieving and that makes people do weird things, so beating yourself up about it isn't necessary. I do have a question though. If he wanted more, if he didn't say it was a mistake and instead wanted a relationship with you, would that have been something you wanted? Are you in love with him? To this, OP made the following response. Our faces are pretty similar, but we have totally different hair colors. Anyone can look at us and tell we're sisters though. We're sisters. I still don't like to use past tense when talking about her. I can't imagine he'd want to be in an actual relationship with me. Dating your dead wife's 10-year younger sister, not a good look, and I'm sure he knows that. I think he sees me as a kid still, in the sense that he'd never see me as a serious partner. I've had crushes on him off and on since I was 8 years old. Under OP's response, user SnooWords 4839 said, think of this as just some sex. Do not romanticize it. Don't fall down the replacement for your sister trap. Next time, tell him no. Remind him he didn't want anyone to know about the last time and you don't want to be used. Under this same thread, user Imaginary List 174 said, you need to have an honest conversation with him about this. You can't just go on and pretend it didn't happen because that will for sure cause issues no matter how hard everyone tries to pretend things are fine. If I were you, I would explain to him that you aren't upset or regretting what happened and that you understand and are not blaming him. Help him understand grief is a messed up thing sometimes. But then you need to explain that even though what happened wasn't necessarily wrong, it can't ever happen in the future again. That you want to go back to the way things were and just kind of move on from this. That you appreciate him and his guidance in your life and that the old relationship is the type of relationship you want, not a one. If you try to explain your feelings in a way that aren't blaming him, hopefully he will hear you and understand. Another comment under this thread made by user Rach5585 said, OP, I'm a big sister, and if my sister weren't married and I died and saw this happen in heaven, I'd not be angry at my little sister. I'd be a little irritated by my husband, but grief makes people do things they regret. My husband has done some things during grief that I have had to just chalk up to him not being himself. I don't recommend repeating the behavior, mainly because it increases the odds of the kids finding out. But as a big sister, there's not much my siblings have ever done that I would not or could not forgive. Let it go, but don't let it happen again without both of you seeing a therapist separately, and wait at least a year so you know you're not just being reactionary. User Difference Many said, reading your post, it is clear you have a long-term crush on your Bill, and that's where the problem lies if you don't let this go immediately. Let it be a one-off and don't do it again. For your sake, for his sake, the sake of the children and the rest of your family. Just move on from this and perhaps don't stay for dinner at his place or anything like that. User Happy Cabbage 9013 said, first, I'm so sorry for both of your losses. Second, grief is a common but not often discussed behavior between two people who are both sharing the loss of a loved one. It's okay to recognize that it happened, that it won't be happening again, and to also extend yourselves grace in the situation to not beat yourselves up too badly about it. He misses his wife, you've been helping him grieve the loss and navigate his new normal and remind him of her. He and his kids are your connection to your sister and a place of comfort / familiarity. It's especially common for this phenomenon to occur around the 6+ month mark of having a partner gone. I do think it's worth a conversation between the two of you so that shame doesn't take root and new boundaries can be discussed moving forward. User Dumbo R Elephant said, yeah, you'll do it again. Under this comment, another user said, 100%. I can understand the grief makes you do weird shit, but at the same time, the tone feels very, oh my god, I don't know what I was doing. Don't want to sound like an insensitive prick, but sounds like it can turn into a kink real fast. User NeamHS Average Life said, everyone here is being very kind and using grief as an excuse, but in reality, how do you move on from this? How do you look at him? Look at your nieces/nephews now. How did you visit your sister's grave/ashes? Was it in her bed? 7 months? Damn, I hope she's haunting you both for life. User Sunday T said, I bet money they will continue this relationship. She had been wanting that man, but her sister's passing just gave her the opportunity to act on her desires. And it's disgusting how you lot are coddling her. And I wish the husband could step forward too so we can drag him too for sleeping with him. 7 months, that's all it took, and you two are skipping over the fact he watched her grow up and she has also liked him. They also did it unprotected and he finished in her. They knew what they were doing, she knew what she was doing, and they both enjoyed every bit of it. I'm willing to bet if it isn't already happening right now, they'll be doing it again. So, while I'm sorry for her loss, no, I'm not gonna feel sorry for her or her situation because it's f***ed up. User Zamin Pesma said, sorry, I don't mean to offend anyone, but maybe it's because I'm from a different culture and background, but I find it so disturbing that it's not so uncommon in the USA that siblings sleep with their deceased sibling's widow/widower in the months after the death of a sibling. Why do people always have to think of or do the act with their deceased sibling's partner? Why can't they still respect the relationship even if the sibling is no longer there? I'm not from the USA, and this is very inappropriate and disrespectful where I come from. User The ID Kid said, discuss it with him. I suddenly lost a spouse in my early 30s and it was the worst experience of my life. All of my family was in another state, we had kids to take care of, and I had only the people she was close to help out. I could barely function. Then about 5 months after she died, I had a similar situation occur with her cousin/best friend. It wasn't something either of us intended to do. We were watching a movie and I absently put my hand down on hers for a second. It was a complete accident. When I realized and yanked my hand away, she grabbed onto it and said it was okay. It went from there. Neither of us was really into it, and when it was done, we said an awkward goodbye, and she left. We didn't speak again for a few weeks. I felt awful about it. It felt wrong, like I had just cheated on my wife with her best friend. That sent me from despair and grief into deep depression and regret. When we finally talked about it, she felt just as bad as I did. We agreed it was a mistake, and we were able to go on from there without things continuing to be weird. I know at the time I had no desire for sex, but I constantly wanted to be held, to be touched in a loving way because it was so unbearably lonely. I was desperate for human contact. I know she sensed that because she said so, and I know we were both missing the intimacy of the relationship we had lost. Being young and inexperienced with loss, we tried to replace that with intimacy, and we both immediately knew it had been a mistake. That was nearly 20 years ago, but looking back now, I'm glad we were mature enough to talk about it at the time. Had we not worked through that when it happened, the additional unresolved guilt and the loss of a second relationship on top of what was already happening emotionally would have been terrible for both of us. And we both would have lost the one person who most understood what we were going through at that moment. In the years since it happened, I've spoken to a lot of people who have lost a spouse, and I've been through a lot of therapy. Apparently, this isn't an uncommon situation. We all want to be close to someone in a time of grief, and sex is often how people attempt to address that. I think it's the result of a culture that says men aren't allowed to be vulnerable and to say they simply want to be held. So they learn to fulfill that need through sex. And women will often go along with that because they want to comfort the person who is in pain. We are all vulnerable to making mistakes when we are grieving. Don't let what happened become something that festers into chronic guilt. About 4 days later, OP made an update. The post is titled, I slept with my sister's husband after she passed away. Now he wants to avoid me. A week ago, I slept with my sister's husband. She passed away 7 months ago. Since then, we haven't been in touch, but I had to see him today because Friday is the day I always pick my niece and nephew up from daycare and babysit them for a few hours before he gets home. He got home late tonight. He said he had a late meeting, but I sensed he was just avoiding me, which might have just been my own paranoia, I don't know. By the time he got home, it was only about an hour before the kids' bedtime. He asked if I could stay and talk after they went to bed. He barely talked to me after that, and he did their bedtime routine with them. I sensed that he didn't want my help, so I just sort of waited around. He told me he was really sorry about what happened. The sex. and that he never should have done that. He didn't plan for it to happen, and he didn't want me to think that he had been thinking of me that way or trying to take advantage of me. He said he just misses my sister so much and he doesn't know what happened the other night. He wasn't thinking of her during it. He just needed somebody, and it felt like the right thing in the moment, but he never should have acted on the feeling with me. He said it didn't feel right at all afterward, and he's worried he led me on, and he's sorry. He thinks she would hate him for what he did, and he takes responsibility for initiating it. He started crying, talking about how much he missed her and how lonely he was. I don't know how to handle people crying. I cry all the time, but when other people cry, I just freeze up or say the wrong thing. I told him it was okay and that I didn't blame him for anything. Whatever feeling he had in that moment, I felt it too, and I wanted it too. I told him that I could give that to him for now if he wants, and I'll understand that that's all it is, nothing more. We don't have to tell anyone, and I won't expect anything like a relationship. I guess I would just rather it be me than him being with another woman. If he's with another woman, a stranger, it means my sister is really gone. It's really selfish, but I don't want him to move on. I don't want another woman to take my sister's place. He said he can't do that, not after I said I loved him. He said it wouldn't be fair for him to take advantage of me that way, and he'd be hurting me. I told him that I just meant I loved him as my brother-in-law or as a friend, a person. I started to undo his pants, and it seemed like he was going to let me, and it seemed like he wanted it for a minute, but then he grabbed my hands and said he was really sorry, but he couldn't do that with me again because I'm like a sister to him, and he wants to go back to me just being like a sister. I felt so embarrassed. I cried my whole drive home. I made a fool of myself. I made myself seem like a desperate person trying to be with my sister's husband. I feel even more embarrassed now than I did after we actually had sex. I texted him and told him I was sorry and that I wanted to go back to being like his sister too. I told him we can forget anything happened and that I really just don't want him to take the kids far away. He said he's not taking them away, but maybe I should take a break from picking them up on Fridays. He appreciates everything I've done and I can still be their aunt, but I need to get back to my own life so he can learn how to live his new reality on his own without me doing so much of what she did. So now he wants to avoid me and for me not to be over at his house. I don't know how I'll ever face him again at this rate. I hope with time this can somehow all just become a thing of the past, and we can go back to how things used to be, but I think it's going to be awkward for a very long time. This update was a big what the f moment for me. Good on OP's brother-in-law for pushing her away. I feel that was the best choice in this situation. Like with many of the comments under the first post, I understand that OP is going through a lot of grief, but initiating and pursuing sex this second time is just so wrong. Her willingness to just be a outlet for her brother-in-law is just so strange to me. It seems like the husband is slowly moving on, but if anything, OP is in even more trauma. She really needs therapy. And I don't know if you saw, but this post has literally 0 upvotes, which just goes to show how controversial a decision this was. User SmoothTrust8481 said, "This is just outrageous. You were quick to undo his pants and try and start something. Honestly, OP, this isn't healthy. I'm not going to judge you, but I will just say that you have to let this man grieve, not try and give him hope or lead him on with the whole, I look like my sister, be with me and not a stranger, or else my sister would be really gone. Please let this man go and seek professional help because even now, you still haven't grieved for your sister if you're willing to do this to her husband while he's mourning for her." User Pleasant Welder 8595 said, "I read your last post and it's funny you talk about your sister like you love her so much. Everything reminds me of her, even birth control. Did you think of her when you fucked her husband in her house where her children live, probably in her bed? Comments are kind and use grief as excuses, but you really should feel bad for what you did. I hope your sister haunts you both." User Haunting Band 4675 said, "Not gonna lie, I know OP is her own person and her fuck up is her own, but I feel like a lot of commenters in the last post making excuses for OP and BL have emboldened OP to act a fool in this update. You all just can't chalk it all up to grief. You have that as some blanket excuse and this update has shown that. OP needs to stay away and get some serious therapy, and Bill needs to focus on his kids and get therapy." User Observe First 13 said, "That's very true. I was so disgusted by everyone telling her what she did was okay. It was bullshit. So I guess she thought she had a pass to try and have a full-on sexual relationship with her sister's husband. Was even so bold to try to undress him and touch his private area after he made it clear he didn't want her. If that was a man, people would be calling it sexual assault if he grabbed the woman and tried to undress her after she already told him no. So yes, OP is a disgusting, heartless backstabber, but I do believe those comments are what made her think she could go any further. Again, I can't believe anyone was telling her what she did was okay. She was claiming to feel bad, and I honestly couldn't believe it when I read she was trying to f him again over and over. User lowlock8987 said, impossible. You just want your sister's husband for yourself. You yourself said you had a crush on him since childhood. That's why you don't want him with another woman. Because you want to be his woman. Your dram-form childhood. You are just using your nephew and niece as an excuse to replace your sister. You aren't their parent to pick them up from daycare. No. You are just hurt that he rejected you. In your first post, you were all acting. I feel bad for sleeping with him. No, you had felt bad because he told you it was a mistake. You are just a hoe. Sorry to say, why would you try to force him to have sex with you again? Your sister must be crying seeing the snake she has for a sister. User OK page 303 said, you're actually so messed up. How are you going to try to use your sister's death as an excuse to sleep with him? I didn't want him to move on with another woman because that would seem like she's gone. Girl, don't use your sister as an excuse for your behavior. You're another woman too, and your statement makes absolutely no sense. You love him and you're taking his grieving as an opportunity for yourself. That's so selfish of you. You couldn't care less about your sister at that moment. I've lost a lot of people in my life and I work at a mental hospital where I see a lot of people grieve too. I understand everyone has a different way of grieving, but I've also seen people use grieving as an excuse for behavior that is completely wrong. You do it the first time might have been a grieving response, but to go back a second time is up from you. I hope you get help and stay away from him because clearly you do not care about your sister. Otherwise, you would not betray her. Like this over and over again. Honestly, your sister deserves better. User Donut after 6356 said, I get the impression you are a people pleaser based on your significant interest in wanting to help and your prior relationships with men who wouldn't meet your needs emotionally or physically, the man you gave a BJ to who didn't want to date, the ex who never considered your pleasure. Even in this situation, you are martyring yourself to your sister's husband. You aren't asking for pleasure, you want him to use you. It gives the impression that you see yourself as selfless, trying to keep him around, trying to ensure your family stays together, and keeping your parents happy with their grandkids, and you close to a brother-in-law and kids you love. You are trying to fix this absolute tragedy in the only way you know how at your younger age, through people-pleasing and sex. It's part of dealing with your own trauma in losing your sister and no doubt also losing pieces of your parents and others who lost a part of themselves in your sister's death. There may also be a part of you that wants to feel as loved, wanted, and special as a woman who was beautiful, a model, a perfect mother, because it must hurt to feel like you are not as good or don't have as much as she had. She had those things because she was older and worked on them. She made the connection with her husband and created that life on her own. You can't force it. It would be ugly and hell in the long term. It also appears that you truly harbor romantic and physical feelings for your brother-in-law, and you have been trying to endear yourself to him through helping out as a guilt-free way of being around him more, hoping maybe he will love and want you more. There is a very good chance he slept with you not just out of mutual grief, loss, and comfort, but also because he undoubtedly knew you wanted him and he wanted to give you what you wanted in a way but felt guilty. Please understand that although I know you probably are not a bad person, this incident is poison. He tainted the last place he got to lay with his loving wife by sleeping with her baby sister. He tainted the life he built and the connections with in-laws by causing this awkward mess. It could never be no strings attached. You are related through his kids, his wife, his bereavement. You can't fix the holes in you by being this for him. You only ruin a possible future because he will be scared you'll tell a future girlfriend/wife or your parents or the kids. So if he's not sleazy, he will avoid you to avoid the shame. By the wording you used, you were undoubtedly hurt when he was ashamed and didn't want you to tell. You have an inappropriate relationship with him. You have tried to have inappropriate talks with him in the past. You don't talk about with your brother as a young teen or older teen or ask to let him use you if you see him as family. I am not scolding, I just need you to see that this is all something you need to come to terms with. You need therapy. You need to be okay with him moving on. You need to not fantasize about the what ifs. Yes, you'll be a wonderful mother, wife, and have a wonderful husband, but you'll never have any of those things in the shadow of your sister's life. You will always be a loving, amazing aunt. Give this man space no matter how much you hurt. If you linger, it will keep happening, and if he's a good man, he will internally destroy himself with guilt and could end up worse off. Please give him space. Don't be in his home for months. You can see the kids, but don't be alone with him in a vehicle or home. You'll be putting out signals if you do. You are not a desperate person. You aren't evil. It's okay to have a crush. Fantasies make sense, but you can't do that here. You are making him a bad person, treating yourself without value, and neither of you deserves it. You are young and recently graduated. You will have an amazing life. It will be okay. I promise you will figure it out. But you need to give your brother-in-law space. You wouldn't let your dad or sister be with you out of grief and comfort if you lost your mom, right? There are more motivations than you are recognizing. It will be okay. Good luck. I hope you get through it unscathed.